then he it. And I said, yes. And it's interesting, that captain is now retired and loves to tell that story. That initially I said, no, I can't do that. And then he said, well, you got picked out of 1,000 people. We trust that you can do it. And it was to be a temporary job for 18 months to 2 years. So that was easy work, right? Well, 20 years later, I retired. So it's been a 20-year temp job that I anticipated at any time the job could go away. So when it did go away on the 31st of December, 2023, I was stunned at how much I wasn't ready to let go of it. Here I thought that for the 20 years, I knew it was going to come to an end, but I'm grieving right now. I miss it terribly. And, but it's really fun to come out and do the presentation because we've had many, many articles and videos and podcasts all over the world. And one of the biggest impetus behind all of that was the New Yorker with a $3.3 million $3.3 million readership. There's the dollar coming in. The readership.
They made the money up by having 3 million subscribers. That's where the money comes.
And so that blew it open. And the story they wrote was too what's the word?
Sensationalized.
Sensationalized, yes. And so by doing these presentations, I feel like I'm getting the story straight.
Okay.
So we're going to get going here with the first slide.
I don't know,
How do I
get
do
the
that?
PowerPoint brought in here.
I think
Okay.
someone told me 5 minutes ago how to do this.
Okay.
Chris, you want to take care of that?
Oh, here's the
I'm not the
ticket.
IT guy.
Thank you.
And I know whenever Sally had Zoom, that's trouble trying to bring up
That's the
a
one.
slide show because the bar keeps disappearing. There we go.
Okay. We need to get a big screen. There we go.
Okay.
Yay.
That's your.
Okie dokie. Okay. Alrighty. So here's Little Brewster Island, 1.5 acres at high tide. Yeah.
I'm radiating.
Jay's radiating. So these are the buildings that are on the island today. And I lived in the one that's at the Keeper's House, 1884. That's where I lived for 5.5 years, 5.5 months each year until 2018. That was the last time. Jay, would you be the one?
Yep, I'm trying to get over here. Where
Thank you. And not only are we a light station, but we're also a fog signal station. So usually the claim to fame for Boston Light is that it's the first established light station in colonial America. And nobody even mentions the fog signal just 2 years later. So we'll be telling that story as we go through as well.
because at least speaking to boaters instead of a library, you realize when it's foggy, you can't see the light.
And this map here, it's not a chart, it's a map. It has colorings to it. It has green, gray, white, and a red dotted line. Anything in green is the Boston Harbor Islands National State Park that was established in 1996. And in it, Little Brewster Island is one of the 34 islands and peninsulas in that park. So what had to happen is the Coast Guard had to agree to allow the Park Service to bring tourists out there during the summertime, which is really a big step for the Coast Guard because nobody got to visit them unless you knew somebody on the island, one of the keepers or assistant keepers would have you.
The big thing the Park Service did is they took in the liability. And when they did that, the Coast Guard said, okay.
Okie dokie. Now, the red line that you see there is in bygone days, the way that you got into Boston Harbor to settle the colony of Boston was going through what we call the Narrows, for which we have, if you
Yeah.
I want to stand up there and show it. Because you go 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, take a hard right rudder around Boston Light, and then go through the Narrows, for which the Narrows is George's Island, Paddock, yeah,
Gallops, Levels.
yes,
George.
and Levels, Love to George's. And then you'd have to turn to go into the harbor, because where it says Massachusetts Bay, that used to be very shallow. They couldn't get through there until they,
Middle of the 19th century, when they started building bigger and faster ships, they said the Narrows is too narrow. So between 1880 and 1900, they dredged and blasted, and now we've got the major entrance into the harbor comes in from that. And if you've been out boating in the area, you realize that they came back and dredged and blasted again so we can get the Panamax in.
And you know what? That's a presentation into itself. All right, so here we go. 1716. They didn't have photographs back then. So what they have is the renditions. And do you see the tree on the island? There's not enough topsoil on the island to have that tree. So that was an embellishment. And
This
then
guy really got carried away.
And this one is 1730, 33 to 34, again in this embellishment, but where the keeper's house is, where the tower is, in the rocky shoreline, that's pretty accurate. And then we had the cannon. And how the cannon showed up is because we had, the first keeper out of Boston Light was George Worthylake. And two and a half years into his tenure, he drowned with his wife, a child, and a slave. Oh, and a friend.
And a friend.
And so they got a second keeper, a temporary one, and he died within 3 days. So then they got the next one, and he was a ship's captain like the first one was too. And in the fog, the light can't be seen. So he requested from the provisional government to get
A
give them
great gun to answer ships in the fog.
to answer it, not to do the signaling. They signaled back. And Boston Light is not the oldest lighthouse in the country. And down in New Jersey, they know that their tower is the oldest, the one that's Sandy Hook. So whenever visitors come to the island or give these presentations, I always say that Boston Light is the first established light station, not the oldest. However, in 2014, we had a refurbishing job on the tower, actually all the buildings on the island, and ready for our 300th anniversary. And lo and behold, we have proof that the first 9 to 14 feet of the tower is the original.
And
But
I
still.
never failed to remind those folks from New Jersey that they had too many tourists down there and got to keep their tower.
And one of the problems with the tower for many, many years is there was a bulge in it. There was a bulge because there was water intrusion. So the Sonaxa, which was the contractor to refurbish the buildings on the island, Jay likes to tell the story. So you can tell
They
the story.
actually fabricated that L-shaped arc of metal. They pull the stones out, numbered them like a jigsaw puzzle, pulled it out, did the repair work, and put it all back together.
So we took a picture because we said it's rubble stone, but when we look at it, it's granite. So people that want to know things about this is, well, where's the rubble stone? There it is, folks. It's 7.5 feet thick at the bottom of the tower, 2.5 feet up at the top. And inside, there's a brick lining to it. So people hope to go out there to see the inside of the tower, and they say the brick. And it's like, where's the rubble stone? It's behind the brick. And Jay and I love this picture here because it shows the lighthouse in its appropriate location. It actually shows where the cannon is. Jay,
Just to the
yeah.
just to the left of the tower.
And do you see the little fishermen sitting on the rocks? There were two reasons or two things that were exported from Boston. One was trees. They were the king's trees. And if anybody was caught taking any of those trees, they would be
in deep doo-doo.
And the other thing, the second export was cod. And so here we have the two of the reasons for somebody's having birthday. And here's the bell. So how long did
That
they
is
use
it until tomorrow.
the bell was brought out here in 1851. And so all that time it was the cannon that was the smog signal. And that's another story. We can come back and tell that one later. And then the lens that we have at the top of the tower today is this one that was put in 1859. And it's still rotating, and it now flashes once every 10 seconds. And we have some more story to tell about that. And this is a photo, and then a family photo. And then the one on the bottom left is the one that is the professional one. And the person who gave us the one on the right, Jay likes to tell the story.
If you notice the middle name Holbrook, she is related to Hal Holbrook. And they had a summer cottage out on Great Brewster. And she presented the keeper with the photo album.
So do you see all those white things on the ground? That's how they bleached their whites. It's so windy out there that
You didn't hang your laundry.
It's going to blow off into the water. And what they did back in those days, the initial tower was it was 75 feet high,
Like
and then they raised it 14 feet for that big Fresnel Lens at the top. And they also raised the roof on this keeper's house. So if we go back to the previous photo, we see that's the keeper's house.
That's the house that was built when they put the Fresnel Lens in. And then some 20 years later, they blew the roof out and made it a lot bigger.
And then we can't have a story about a lighthouse in New England without mentioning Edward O. Snow. Does that name ring a bell to anybody? All right, well, here's a picture of 1937, just about to drop the package out of the plane onto the island.
You know who the first flying Santa was? If you say Ed Winkapaw, you get a trophy.
And then what is the access to the island? This is a photo taken in 1947 circa. And if you notice, there's two tiling sets. And what that does is that you take the lighthouse station boat and bring it up, put it on the rails, and then haul it into the boathouse. This one shows two rails because the one on the left was the keeper's personal boat rail.
And if any of you have been near the island and you see that rusty thing that's to the north side, that's what it was when it was looking new.
All right, so we said we had a wedding out at Boston Light in 1994. This is with Jay and myself. We met in the auxiliary. We fell in love. Actually, before that part came, well, yeah, it happened. We didn't know it happened. Jay was down in Plymouth. He had an operational facility down there, a sailboat. My dad and I had one up in Boston. So we'd take turns. I'd go down and crew for Jay, and then Jay would come up and crew on my dad and my boat. And then we were cruising out by Boston Light in August of 1993. And I said to Jay, I've always wanted to get married out here. And Jay said,
let me know.
A year later, I said to Jay, is the offer still open? And he says,
yes.
And then we went to the Coast Guard and said, we want a permit to get married on the island. How do we do that?
$1 million insurance policy for 24 hours.
And so we went out there, and there was no dock out there at the time. And we had 3 boats. It was interesting that we had to get the insurance because of the 16 people that were out there. my brother-in-law was in the Coast Guard. My sister was a retired Coast Guard. And there were like 7 auxiliaries, and then the rest of the family. We were out there for about an hour. And
Sally said, come on, the tide's going. You gotta get off.
and so in November, we started doing training as assistant keepers out there. And we both love marine history, maritime history. So we did a 5-year search. And in 1999, wrote a book called Boston Light, a Historical Perspective. And that's what helped me get on the payroll as the keeper in 2003. And this is an aerial of Little Brewster Island at low tide. I actually took this photo because the helicopter that is a Flying Santa pilot, he came and visited the island.
They doing the tall ships race, and it was foggy that morning, so they postponed. So he was looking for a place to park.
So this is all cleared up, as you can see. So I took that picture. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. And then the tower. At the entrance to the tower, we have a little museum room next. And then we go up 76 spiral stairs. And then you see the brick lining in that. And then we do one ladder up to the gear room and a second ladder up to the lantern room. And as you can see, the one on the right, those wheels, those chariot wheels, that's what rotates it now. And because the light is now automated 24 hours a day, 360 days a year, there's a little glitch and they keep on wearing down and the light keeps on going off. So if anybody lives on the waterfront in Winthrop or Naharnd or Hull, they're always calling the Coast Guard, and they used to call me. They took my phone number out of their phones. And so the Coast Guard is really trying hard to keep this lens that's been here since 1859.
19th century technology in the 21st century, and they don't always go together.
And then this is the lens. I love both these photos. The one on the left doesn't look like an eye with eyelashes looking out, so you're safe. And then the other one is with a wide angle lens. And that is the 9-foot tall lens. You'll see, if you read history, you'll see it listed as 13, and you'll also see it as 9, because you have the gear work down below, and then the lens. So the lens itself is the 9-footer.
It's officially a second order Fresnel lens.
And this is looking inside the lens. Isn't that beautiful? I just sit down on the floor and look up at it and meditate. And now we get into the 21st century. Yay. Okay. So in 2000, the Park Service said, we want to give tours out of the island, and we'd like auxiliaries that know about the island to help give the tours. And the Coast Guard thought, well, you know, we've had people, auxiliaries, training as assistant keepers, but it wasn't a formal thing. It was just a checklist, and we went through the checklist. So the auxiliary came up with the Boston Light Augmentation Program and asked me if I would be the chair to get both of those programs off the ground. And I said, yeah, sure. At the time, I was a college professor at Curry College, Masters of Education, teaches how to teach. And so it's I write curriculum. I can write manuals for an interpreter and a manual for the watch standards. So I said to Jay, honey bunny, can we buy a small boat just for 2 years, because it's a 2-year appointment? And lo and behold, 24 years later, we still have that sucker.
And I get tired of having my little sailboat be a lawn ornament, so I got rid of it.
And this is what you would do if you were going to go to Boston Light today. This is what you'd come into. And our boat, our auxiliary vessel 292, we go up the ladder, and any gear we have to hoist it up, hand it up, and it's all tide dependent because there's no water at the end of the pier.
If you see on the left, that fender that you see is about the same size the Freedom uses.
What's the Freedom, Jay?
The Freedom is the catamaran that's right over across the bay.
Okay.
So
It's a big ferry
for
boat.
a 20-foot boat, those are big, big fenders, and they really pay for themselves.
All right, so people say, Sally, what do you use for potable water? Because we don't have any pipe running from the town of Hull. And we drive in our SUV, we go to Eastern Massachusetts, we go to Simpson Spring, we pick up the bottles, we drive it to the marina, we put the bottles in the boat and bring the boat out to the island, and then we take it off the boat and bring it into the keeper's house in the cellar. Very, very laborious. And this is just one of my favorite pictures looking at the island. And people say, what does the inside of the house look like? Well, now you see the kitchen. Isn't that gorgeous?
Every room with a view.
Every room with a view, yeah. And this is the living room. And at Christmas, we would have a Christmas tree and Flying Santa would come. And then we're looking at the island on the left. That's the flower gardens that you saw in the boat. And now they're in the ground. And what do? We work. So there's the keeper on the tractor. I always wear the bonnet when I'm on the island so that people know that the keeper is on the island. And Jay likes the one at the bottom right.
Plus, Little Brewster Island has its own sewage treatment plant. And one of the things you had to do was do some minor maintenance to it. I never saw the active duty doing this, but
Well, no, the standards changed is what happened. And this is me cleaning the poop out that goes in a bucket. And then monthly, because we weren't out there during the winter time, there would be 5 months that a third party commercial entity would come out and clean it and take the poop buckets and bring me new buckets. And what do? Oh my gosh, by land or by sea? What was this? Was this the
this was when they were removing the
Oh, the
generator.
generator, yeah. Yeah, the island doesn't have a generator.
We had a fuel leak, so they decided they were gonna abandon the 4,000-gallon diesel tank and remove the generator that had about 20 hours on it. And so now we depend upon our 30, 40-year-old extension cord.
Oh, yeah, our power line is from Hull. It's 13,000 feet, and it was supposed to be replaced in 2004. We still have it. And they tested it about 10 years ago, and the island's only getting like 75% of the power. So that's the other thing that the Coast Guard's concerned about. We lose our electricity. What's going to turn that 4,000 pounds of glass and brass at the top of the tower? And when they were public tours, 2000 to 2017, this is the auxiliary with a ranger getting trained to give tours on the island. And then this is the boat. This is the Columbia Point. It belongs to UMass Boston, right over yonder. And this is their research boat, but they can also use it for services like they're using it with Park Service. So we have many, many entities involved in bringing the tours out. We have the Coast Guard owning the island. We have the keeper, or we had the keeper. Then we had this boat, the Park Service, and they're not-for-profit, Boston Harbor Now, and then the auxiliary volunteers, and we had the Friends of Boston Harbor Islands that had the mix. So that was 7 things. And I was the hub, making sure that everybody was on the same page on a tour day. And this is the ranger directing the visitors into the boathouse where they were given a safety spiel. And this is what the inside of the boathouse looked like. And then they would go out and meander around the island. We could take up to 50 visitors, and they could walk up to the tower in groups of 8. And so we had to keep them moving. We only had like 13 minutes to get up to the top and come back down. I was the safety officer. Would you believe that in all the years out there, we only had 2 incidences, and one was at the dock. The dock is owned by the Park Service, so that wasn't ours. And the other one was a woman that, oh no, it was the guy that
The
fell.
guy,
Oh, he was on the dock. Both of them was, the boat thing. Yeah, so we didn't have any incidents on my watch. And here's what the island looks like with the visitors. One group is down at the cistern building. There's others that are picnicking. And as what we do as tour guides, we don't walk a group around. We station people at various places. So if the visitors want to talk to us, we're there for them. If they just want to watch the seagulls fly by, we leave them alone. And then they go. It's an hour and a half visit. And look at the flag is right out. We have like a 25-knot wind going on there. And then what happens is between the tours, we have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We can take drive-bys. Look at we had so many invasions of kayakers. Amazing. And then we talk about the water. We cannot drink the water in the cistern building. It is not potable. And the reason why it was built in 1884 was for the fog signal, because they had coal to turn in the water into steam for the whistle sound signal. And then we have the calm.
needless to say, we didn't get off the boat that day.
The water, no, we brought the water, those big bottles. And oh yeah, so this is the storm damage that we had.
These are the
And-
pictures that Sally showed them, and they said, why were you out there?
Well, the thing is, it was only supposed to be a nor'easter that was going to blow through in 24 hours. It turned out to be a full-fledged blizzard, and we were stuck out there for 3 additional days. And people said, "Weren't you scared? I mean, what was it like?" Well, the waves were bashing the back of the keeper's house, so it felt like I was in one of those motel vibrator bed things. And so even the Coast Guard said, "Weren't you like concerned, scared?" I said, "No, what a way to go. I get washed out to sea in a storm." No, I had no
They
fear.
offered to take Sally and
Oh, great.
Audrey off, but you know what it's like closing camps? I mean, you've got to take everything out of the refrigerator,
And
so
unplug
the
it.
window wasn't long enough, so they opted to stay.
And it was only supposed to, blow right through, right? So there's been no public access to the island since 2018. But I was able to stay or live on the island for those 5 months. It wasn't until September when we had an inspection, and we failed miserably. And this place is old. There's asbestos. There's lead. And they said, "What are you doing living out here?" So that's been my and this is the cause of having that inspection. And so this is the damage, and we have auxiliaries that come out and replaced the shingles and removed the rocks. Look at the bottom right. That was like a cookie monster just took a chunk right out of the, talk about erosion issues.
So
And
these
how
gals came up from Florida to pitch rocks.
well, the one on the bottom, the other ones came from Rhode Island. And so how do you can't shovel the rocks off the beach. Well, you could the first layer. So it was just pitching them. So if you wanted to do a watch, be ready to pitch. And people say, do you really need lighthouses? Well, between Little Brewster Island and Great Brewster Island, yeah, I can't tell you how many boaters try to go through it because they don't look on a paper chart. And even if they're GPS, that's not telling you, the picture's not telling you it's there. And this sailboat, particular one, was on a Sunday, and it was a tour day. And we saw this coming between the 2 tours. And so I said to all the staff, "Jump up and down and yell, be crazy." Let them go, say, "Go, go, go." And then crunch. The person I was on watch with, we took turns at night until 1 o'clock in the morning when the tide came in and Cito could take it off. And so what happens when we lose our electricity out on the island? When the town of Hull loses it, we do. So we have a backup for the light at the top of the tower, 2 ones on either side of the tower. And then down at the bottom picture is the solar panel. And the one on the right is the sound signal, the fog signal. Now, how many of you know about the MRAS, the marine radio? You do it yourself. You go on in this area, you go on channel 83, you take the mic of your radio and you click it 5 or more times, and you will activate Boston Light. And so there's no maintenance for this sucker. When the ACE navigation team comes out to check the light, they will also check the fog signal, but typically it's something that only gets checked twice a year. And then this is a photo of what it looks like to have those LED lights. There's 180 degrees away from each other because the tower's in the way. And if you notice, there's shades pulled down because we don't want to have sunlight do any damage to the lens. And then a lighthouse story is not fully told until we talk about the Black Lab, which is the Coast Guard's mascot. And this is Sammy. And Sammy was aging. And so for the last 2 years of his life in the winter, he spent it with us down in Plymouth. And in 2004, the day after the end of the tour, Jay and I went into base Boston because I had to check my emails in there, came back, and Sammy didn't come greet us. And I'm saying, oh, this isn't a good idea here. What's going on? And he had laid down to take a nap and didn't wake up. So he is buried on the island. And when we were out there, we had a little garden and we had headstones. And bringing closure to the last woman, U.S. Coast Guard Light Station, 1716 to 2023. And the first keeper was George Worthylake. And the top on the left, that's the Worthylake ancestry, the clan. So they're representing the first, and I'm the last on the bottom right. And this is our sunrise at Little Brewster Island. We were leaving, this was a time when the Coast Guard, it must have been off season because this was taken, I took it from the Coast Guard boat. And then this was what Jay calls my Pavarotti Day. We just had it on June 6th, my retirement party. And so we have the dignitaries in the left, which is the Park Service, the Coast Guard, Boston Harbor Now, and the one on the right is from the state. And this is the end. That's it.
Questions?
Sure. I'm taking questions now, yes. We power the light with that 13,000-foot extension cord from Hull.
And what turns the light is a 0.5 horsepower electric motor, which replaced the clockwork mechanism that was there prior to it.
And if we lose power from Hull or the lens hiccups on those chariot wheels, that's when the LED lights on the first gallery of the tower hit it. They automatically go. From what I hear, because they have recently put in a new solar panel about a month, about 4 weeks, which gives them plenty of time to recharge the battery or get going.
The toughest thing is getting up there when something needs to be done. You can see what the obstacles are.
You're next.
I had a question. You mentioned tapping your radio
Yes.
5 times. Would you expand on that a little bit?
Okay,
How that
sure.
works and what it does?
It's called an MRAP, and I can't remember what
the acronym
The
stands.
acronym stands for, it's marine.
Marine
It's
radioactivated
hidden,
sea
yeah.
capsule.
Yeah,
And so you just, in Boston Harbor, and you want to activate the fog signal, because it's peaceful fog out by Boston Light. Take your mic, put your radio on 83 alpha,
Oh, 83, okay.
yeah, and click it 5 or more times. And it will stay that way between 20 and 45 minutes. And if you haven't sailed past it quite yet, just reactivate. And so
please
many
don't
people
do it
don't
to our neighbor out at Graves Lake, because he lives within the tower. He can't get away from the signal.
Okay,
I thought that there was a law that said that it was going to be manned in perpetuity. What happened?
okay. So this is the short of the long. Okay, so, what happened in 2019 is the Coast Guard went to Congress and explained the situation. And so it was through that they said, okay, it does come out. And so now it can be transferred to another entity. And so so we ended it.
Transfer to what? Where did it hear?
It's under the National Park Administration. It's for the transfer of lights. The first thing is a federal agency.
You
If
can
no
stand back
federal
over here.
agency takes it, then it goes to state. If no state takes it, then municipal,
Thank
then 501c3. And if all that fails, then it can get to go up on the auction block. And honestly, we don't see it. Our neighbor has no interest in it.
Who owns it now?
The GSA owns all federal property.
And so the Coast Guard maintains the light at the top of the tower and the fog signal. Once it's transferred to a new owner, it'll be up to the new owner to mitigate the issues with the island. So the question is, so it hasn't been manned since October of 2018. Because it's not for human residents. And so whoever gets the island, they can do within reason what they want to do with it, knowing that it is registered as a federal landmark as well as a land site. It's both. So Dave Waller just made his lighthouse last year. It went into the historic records, but it wasn't. When the Coast Guard transferred it to them, it wasn't. He made it then. So this is the part that I have to sort of dance around because it's a real touchy subject. And those who live in the Boston area and see Boston Light, they are just heartsick to know that there's nobody living in it. However, in this day and age,
That's it. Thank you.
I can't stand still. Haven't you seen that? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry for those who are listening from a distance. So what had happened in 2019 is that the Coast Guard called in the politicians from this area to explain to them the situation with Boston Light and why they want to make it, to transfer it, and why it is not habitable. It's not habitable. It does not meet the standards. And whoever gets the island, they may, bring those standards up so that they can live in the house again. That's going to be up to them. But this has been a long trial because it started back in 1989 with Ted Kennedy going out to Boston Light and going back to Congress and saying it must remain manned with a Coast Guard presence. That there was a line that wasn't clear.
When you start reading the small print, it
And-
was his intention that at some point somebody else take it over.
And so what he did is he gave $350,000 to the Coast Guard to do for a year until we could all, as a government, figure out what to do with Boston Light. And it isn't until the dire need came in 2018, after there were damage on the island, can't live out there anymore, that the Coast Guard realized, okay, it's time. They went to Congress and Congress concurred. So it's now with GSA along with the other lighthouses that have been transferred. By the way, did you know that Kennedy was behind that law? He was the one that created that or made it happen. And so our idea was to transfer all Coast Guard lighthouses to other entities with Boston Light at the bottom of the list. However, come 2018, 2019, it went up to the top because the Coast Guard does aids to navigation. They do not maintain those buildings. Okay? They don't, it's not part of their job description.
If somebody funded it, yeah, but they don't fund it, so.
Yes,
So the actual experience of the lighthouse keeper at that, like, so I'm thinking turn of the 20th century, 1905, say.
Yeah.
The light was electric then, or was
no, in 1905, it was
Been
kerosene.
kerosene.
So one
In,
person lived there?
in, no, there
It-
were, did you see the three houses? There was the duplex and then the keeper's house. There were three keepers in
Up-
1905.
And with families there?
There were
or-
three families.
And the kids rode to Hull? to go to
There's
school?
another story into itself, but
Well, I'm checking, what was that, what was it actually like to be the lighthouse keeper in 1905?
in 1905, it would have been a lot of hard work because the light had to be shut down at dawn, fired up at sunrise,
Oh, yes, maybe.
and then it had to be maintained throughout the night. That's why they needed three keepers because they rotated. They each had a shift. So each day was a shift. And then when I lost my train of thought with that, please forgive. Oh, and what rotated the lens was a wind-up clockworks with a heavy, heavy weight that would hang
Big
down the side
glorified
of the
grandfather clock.
yeah, inside the tower. There's the part of that works is still there where it dropped on, and they'd have to wind it up every 3 or 4 hours,
was-
whatever that
It
was.
was actually the fog signals and the mechanisms for the lenses that brought on the assistant keepers. Up until the middle of the 19th century, they said, okay, keeper, it's up to you. And then it didn't, they realized they couldn't palm it off on the keeper and his family. And that's when the assistants came into being.
All three families there.
And
So
The
to-
electricity didn't come to Boston Light till about 1960. They
Well-
brought out a gas powered generator and then later they laid the cable.
So to answer your question, we know in 1910 that there was a school teacher at George's Island that would come out to Boston Light. So the keeper, the head keeper, would row to George's Island, which is a good 2 miles away, bring the keeper for the day, and bring her back to George's Island. And they did that in the dead of winter. And it would happen for 3 months. And then she would go someplace else. So every year she would come, whoever that she was, they would stay for 3 months.
There was a lot of homeschooling too.
And so it's up to the parents, she would give them enough work until she came back 9 months later. And the other story I love to tell. We know from 1928 into around 1935, 36, there were 3 keepers, 3 wives, 19 kids on a 1.5 acre island with a duplex
Outhouse,
outhouse and a single.
outhouse. And you didn't go to the keeper's outhouse. You used the one on your side of the duplex.
So what happened is, once all the kids were in school, the Norwoods had 9 kids. The principal keeper had 5. And the first assistant keeper had 5. And so, what was it going about?
When they got old enough,
Oh, right, they go into home.
the wife would lease a house on Stony Beach and the kids would live there because you couldn't get across Nantasket roads dependably in the winter time.
Stony Beach is directly across from Boston Light. And so the oldest of the kids of the Norwoods was Priscilla. And she used to row straight across and then they'd walk to school and then she would roll them back until she went to high school and then things changed a little bit. But that's a whole, how that whole family thing out there is truly a story into itself. So I love that. That was a great question.
I don't know if anybody on the PowerPoint, I don't know, answer them.
Another question of them?
Yes. I can't. I'm gonna step up to you.
The power cable failed. Who's gonna replace it?
Okay, if the power fails, it's that light at the top is going to go out, and the primary light until they decide what to do will be those 2 backup lights, the LED lights. So the Coast Guard does not have the, what is it? It's like $4.5 million to replace that.
13,000 foot extension.
Yeah, 13,000 foot extension cord.
When it came up on their budget, there was always something else that trumped it. I mean, we gonna keep Station Point Allerton running, or are we gonna replace the cable to the light? It's pretty obvious answer.
And to piggyback on Dave Waller, how many know the name Dave Waller? Okay, Dave Waller bought Graves Light, which is 2 miles north of Boston Light, in 2013 for just shy of $1 million. He bought it. It was through the Lighthouse Preservation Act. And he has made that into a living museum for himself. It's on a ledge. There's no pier there. There's no nothing. So unless you're friends with them or a contractor, you're not going to see the restoration project he did. It's amazing. So we bought it for almost $1 million, and he probably put another 1.5 million into it. So he has solar. He's got a flush toilet. He's got a kitchen. If he can do it, Boston Light can certainly do it. The technology is there. That doesn't need to have an electric cord from the mainland doing it. And because Graves Light is still maintained by the Coast Guard, the light and the fog signal, they're out there quite a bit. And they're just at awe about all the electronic widgetry that Dave tries to convince them to think about doing Boston Light and get rid of that power cord before it fails. So I have the same question as you, sir.
If you Google Graves Light, you can get onto his website, which is very informative.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
You mentioned the backup lights at LED. What's the primary light?
The primary light is electric power, and it's a 1,000-watt halogen lamp. And they keep changing because there's not much demand for 1,000-watt halogen lamps. Coast Guard has to take and reconfigure when the next one. When we started there were big bi-post 1,000-watt halogen lamps. Then they replaced it to some that are about the size, and now they're gone to LED. So it's a constant change, trying to take and come up with the technology. And there's just not much demand for 1,000-watt halogen lamps. Well, they've got the LEDs on the outside. At some point, they might use switch to LEDs, but it's all budget related.
And you know about the public outcry about unmanning the island and yada yada yada. Talk about the lens. Oh my God, the sky would fall if that lens was ever taken out. I wouldn't want to be around when that happens.
I
Oh,
can't remember the name of it, but it's,
Okay,
the-
can we just, the question
it's
is,
the one that got in the bidding war with them.
there is a partner that Dave Waller connected with, so they share information and they share their projects, and I can't think of it,
If
I'll
you said his
remember it.
name, I'd catch on it.
So, don't.
He's the one that bought mine at Fledging.
And because Dave Waller is the techie on all of that, what needed to get done to the interior to make it safe to get into it. That's how that relationship came in.
No,
Uh,
the liability, the question was using it for B and B. The liability and access is way beyond what anybody could afford for insurance.
So is the item for sale or not? I'm not sure.
is Boston Light for sale?
Yes.
That's the
Hi.
last piece of the puzzle. It
No.
probably won't. I can't imagine it getting there.
Okay, Jay went down to the whole lineage. It first goes to another federal agency, then a state agency, then a municipality, and then a 501c3. And then and only then does it go to the auction block. Because Boston Light was the first established light station in colonial America. Jay and I just don't see that happen.
Because it still has to be available to the public. Yeah, that's part of the legislation that they can't get around that.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
That's the interesting thing on
In case you're interested, we did bring Boston Light book that we wrote back in 1999. With $20, and then
Yeah.
we'll story about cleaning the lighthouse spot. So if you're interested, you can come on up. Thank you so much for coming tonight. This is amazing.
Thank you.